First the thought, then the action. Premise on the Cartesian declaration, I think, therefore I am. Thought precedes action, this we accept to be true, at least in this instance. But what precedes the thinking, the thought? That's the stuff of mystery and dreaming, and that's what intrigues me, and may hold the key to imagining the possibility of changing the conversation. So first to begin, as we like to say, the first challenge we face is accepting the many challenges in seeking to foster change and the idea for same. Assuming that we're able to get past the question of why unscathed, we next have to deal with the question of how. How do we begin to engage the conversation to change the thinking to action change? That is the question, or rather that is the challenge.
I think it's shocking, our approach to food at home. We spend over $4 billion to import food into this country annually. $4 billion. Yet, we have 25 varieties of yam, there are 40 varieties of cassava, there are 50 varieties of sweet potato. We want to talk fruit, we have 84 different varieties of fruit. The humble mango, we have over 35 varieties. This diversity is incredible. This is something that I think we should be proud of.
Cities all over the world are expanding, they're increasing, they're undergoing the same type of development that we've undergone, to the point where the original Port of Spain and the downtown Port of Spain that used to comprise the city, used to constitute the city, is now turned into this sort of megalopolis, this sprawl. And it's difficult to comprehend. And when we think of the problems, we think of the infrastructural problems, the water, the power, the traffic congestion, the crime, the segregation, the polarization that exists, the situation that has led to what's happened in this country recently with the state of emergency. Sometimes it seems completely insurmountable. It seems like we've got to a point where we can't really control it. It's gone out of control. In the way that we could control that original plan, we can't really control this anymore. It's almost as if we're victims of the city rather than people that have willingly or willfully designed the city or formulated the city.
A dream come true. Central Bank Auditorium, a red carpet, a local and international audience. Hollywood, here I am. Oh boy. Lucky, humble yourself now. You're in a blue suit, black shoes, and a red, white, and black tie with the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, of which I'm proud, zoning people, the steel pan. If my friend Marina were here, she would say, Jillian, don't worry. Even though you are breaching all the fashion rules and the fashion police may not be sympathetic to you, that shows courage. And that's what you have to speak about.
Anyway, I decided to take my dream as romantic and sexual fulfillment, which meant to me that I would be deflowered by my one true love. And growing up Christian, I believed that God would protect me and provide me with a husband. But when I found myself aged 17, one moment an untouched virgin, the next a rape survivor, I decided it wasn't fair or right for me to wait indefinitely for my dream to be fulfilled under marital rights that I couldn't force or schedule or arrange.
The big myth, number one, is that in fact it's not really a crime. When we get together with friends and family and we discuss crime in our country, crime in Belmont or crime in Digo or crime in Marabella, nobody's speaking about corruption. That's the honest truth. When the commissioner of police comes on TV to talk about crime, he isn't speaking about corruption. And we know for sure when the Minister of National Security is speaking about crime, he's not talking about corruption either.
We've come to know ourselves a place where our politicians spend more time fighting one another than they spend on thinking about and taking actions for the better of our country. But you know, it's not entirely their fault. We have a system that corrodes. We have a system that corrodes even the most well-intentioned people who enter into the ring of politics. You see, you have to hearken back to the injustices and prejudices of the past to understand the energy that is evoked between our political divide.
Being present for the birth of a child kickstarts the nurturing instinct. It's been well proven that just like the woman who's giving birth, the father also has a surge in the hormone called oxytocin, which is commonly known as the love hormone. They are on a journey together.
So imagine you're standing in the savannah facing the northern range, and the ridge lines that you see all around you are basically what make up your watershed. Any rainfall that falls within those ridge lines will come down towards you. Any water that falls on the outside of those ridge lines will go into someone else's watershed. This is a picture of Port of Spain. Port of Spain is built on a floodplain, so that when Port of Spain floods, it's really what nature designed for that area. All right, and as we slowly put our housing further and further up the side of the slopes, we're taking down the trees that would normally slow down that water. And what we're doing is accelerating that water down into the floodplain, and we get floods. All right, everything is connected.
I would tackle sexism and homophobia fearlessly, not only, for example, by approving a national gender policy, but in a range of legislation that needs to change. Let me give you an example of something. Let's talk about the Children's Act of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this is an awesome piece of legislation designed to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation of all kinds. What does it legislate? Well, for example, for two 15-year-olds of different sexes engaging in touching that involves the genitals, this is now completely decriminalized, which is extremely progressive because we don't want to send our children to jail. We want to give them guidance, counseling, we want to give them support, and even contraception. But if you are two 15-year-olds of the same sex, the penalty for that same act is now life imprisonment. This is to be contrasted with the Sexual Offences Act, which, for the same crime, they're termed serious indecency, the penalty was 10 years in the first instance and 15 in the second. We are actually making the penalties more severe for our children. And don't think it was just the government, it was the PNM and the UNC. Read the Senate debates and you will see.
And I've managed to put together that formula or that equation, which basically explains, this is a global thing. This is what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago, of course, as you know, is a microcosm of what's happening internationally, globally, not so? It's just a metaphor. So that viral capital coming from your left side and viral global warming coming from your right side will lead. This is not a postulation, this is not a prophecy, this is not a hypothesis or theory. It will lead to the fragmentation of organic life as we know it on the planet. And that's the best image I could have stolen from the web to explain that process of fragmentation. Just at the top left-hand corner, you see where it's dark? That represents mass. Mass biotic life, mass culture, mass civilization, mass humanity, mass organic life. And as you see, as it goes through time, through your future history, to the right, through the century, it will lead to a kind of thinning, a kind of denudation, a kind of draining until what you get at the bottom right-hand corner, there is a kind of, there's nothing.
I work with big companies, and big companies seem so damn competent that normally when I'm first walking through their glassy doors, I'm kind of nervously thinking, I'm not sure there's anything I'm really going to be able to tell these guys that they haven't heard before. But in my experience, and sometimes to my surprise, big companies are often struggling with something really fundamental. They're often struggling to understand their consumers. They're struggling to understand people. They're struggling to understand us. My specialization, applied business anthropology, uses methods from anthropology to study people, to study how people live, what people care about, why people do the things they do. And we do those studies for businesses. We apply anthropology to businesses.
Time preference. What I mean here is not that we are unpunctual, we know that we are unpunctual. But we share that in common with African societies and with Latin American societies. What I mean by time preference is that we are people who don't think intergenerationally. At least most of us don't think intergenerationally. We don't worry about the effects of what we do today on our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. Now, let me just, Norway is a country which started to produce oil in 1971. In 1990, Norway established their sovereign wealth fund. And today, Norway's sovereign wealth fund is of the order of $900 million US dollars. Billion US dollars, I'm sorry, billion US dollars. Trinidad and Tobago has operated this oil industry for 100 years. And we only established our heritage fund in 2005, and we boast about the fact that it's now reached $5 billion. Not thinking intergenerationally. Our approach to planning and to the environment is similarly due to the fact that we despoil the environment because we are not concerned about the intergenerational impacts of what we do.
So today, I want to challenge you to join in a revolution of respect. Because if you can look somebody in the eye who you disagree with and listen to them long enough to say genuinely, I hear you, and if you can call people into your conversations who don't understand at all and make them feel welcome, and if you can understand that possibly the most revolutionary thing you could do is band together with those who are different than you, the world that emerges from this latest shift in power can be a place where minority is no longer a dirty word, where different is understood and accepted, where people are no longer based on their blue or green or any other color notes, but on a currency of ideas. And so the work that I do today in Trinidad and Tobago to develop film, to theater, to call back out to men on the streets, to call in those who dismiss me on the basis of my sexual orientation, all of this work is because I believe in change. And if you can look someone back who has insulted you and pay them the kind of respect that you want them to pay you, now that is a revolution.